Okay, hit go live on YouTube.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the NBA Finals edition of the Occupy Fantasy Strategy Show. Chuck Silver here with Brian Jester, co-founder of Occupy Fantasy. Hopefully, we can help you guys find the edge today. How we doing, Brian?
What's up, big dog? Good to talk to you. It's been a while since we've been on the stream together, so happy to talk to you and just trying to absorb any NBA knowledge I can before tonight's big contest.
Right, and you can, get me back with some advanced DFS strategy too. So we have a pretty good contest on DraftKings tonight. It's $1 million to first, $25 entry. And so I think that's the contest most people are going to want to hear about. What are we doing to get a little bit different compared to, the smaller contest that still had 100K to first? But I don't think we do that much. It's a bigger field, so we do get a little bit more different in the attempt to get that solo ship. But I think the chances of someone winning first place and not having any dupes is pretty low, particularly in this contest when I think it's just so likely that Jokic ends up as the top play on the slate, right? With the pricing with Jokic and Jimmy. So,
Yeah, I think so, Chuck. I mean, just really quickly, if you look at some of the previous NBA Finals Game 1 Showdown contests that have had $1 million to first, there was two pretty big chops, and then actually the first one they ran was a solo winner. It was, I want to believe, Goran Dragic. Dragic got injured, and whoever the backup was came in, and someone shipped it solo. So there are a couple of different ways to try to play for that. However, like you said, it's going to be very, very difficult, and it'll probably take some sort of out of the box scenario for someone to win it solo.
Yeah, I mean, a starter going down with injury would be a pretty easy way. Because for me in the playoffs, a lot of the things I'm just trying to figure out is the minutes. The performance will come, but who's going to be on the court, and especially who's going to be on the court to close the game. And so we don't have a starting lineup for tonight's games. The Nuggets are going to be the same, but Miami, we don't know if they're going to keep rolling with Caleb Martin in the starting lineup or go back to Kevin Love at the power forward position. So that's going to be a big thing once we get those starting lineups. We're probably not going to have it until a half hour before the game starts.
So how does that impact the way that you're building? Because we saw Miami change it up towards the back half of the conference finals. So what are you thinking? What do you think is the most likely starting lineup that they produce, and how much will you have to pivot if you're incorrect?
So the way the model is set up right now, the model thinks Caleb Martin's starting. It has him for 38 minutes. Even off the bench, he was playing about 35. I would not be surprised to see Kevin Love back in the starting lineup. Kevin Love's not showing up on the model at all. He probably is projected for a couple minutes, not enough to show up here. But I'm wondering if the Nuggets do something like the Lakers did, or I'm sorry, if Miami does something like the Lakers did when they played the Nuggets, where they put Anthony Davis on Aaron Gordon and had Rui or Jared Vanderbilt on Jokic, and AD was just playing that weak side help. And someone else floated the idea earlier that they'll start the game with Kevin Love on Jokic and just have Bam play a really hard help side. But I'm not, I'm not sure. I'd have to see the starting lineup to be sure. As of now, I'm building as if Caleb Martin is starting, though.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, I know we're talking about tonight's game, but what do you take away from Caleb Martin's unreal performances in the conference finals?
I've talked a lot about players overperforming, and I don't know if I've ever seen a player overperform as much as him, but the confidence he took some of these shots with, like these were extremely difficult shots
Right.
that he was taking and making. So I don't know. I
mean, the way I always think about it, Chuck, is like, I mean, all these guys that are playing the league, they were the guy at some point in their life, right? And even like as recently as college for Caleb Martin and his brother when they played for Nevada, like they were the guy. And all it takes is 1 ounce of confidence, and hey, we need you to be the guy tonight or this series. And these guys, all these guys have been that at some point in their life. Now it's just like, all right, let's turn it on. Let's be that guy. And like you said, he was shooting with confidence, and that certainly plays a part.
I mean, these step back threes are just like, it's hard to take those shots, even if you're not at that level. It's just, you have to make it. And he kept making them. I mean, the shooting percentages are unsustainable, but I mean, we know he's a good rebounder, so there's a reasonable floor. His price hasn't come up that much. It's still below Michael Porter Jr. It's not that far above Aaron Gordon. So I don't know. I'm going to play Caleb Martin as of now if I get more information later. But then even after that, the question is Kevin Love going to be in the rotation? Are they going to try to match Jokic's or try to match Bam's minutes with Jokic? it's not much information to go off of from their regular season matchups because the teams were so different. For example, the first time they met December 30th, I mean, this is basically their starting lineup, but I think Jamal Murray took like 9 shots this game, and the over under for him today is like 21. So there's just nothing to get from this, even the usage numbers. And so looking at the minutes, Bam Adebayo was not playing every minute that Jokic was on the court. He came out a little early, and they put in Orlando Robinson. He's not going to be in the rotation tonight. So the question is if uh, they replace Orlando Robinson with. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can see this. The question is if they replace Orlando Robinson with no, no,
We could see
with
part of it.
Cody Zeller or Kevin Love. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, all good. So I mean, as you're trying to correct that, I think that's one of the biggest keys for game one in a new series when you're playing NBA Showdown is which guys have the potential to either outperform what they did in the previous series
Mm,
or new guys completely into the rotation. I remember vividly a couple years ago when DeMarcus Cousins was on the Clippers, and it wasn't the
mm,
finals, obviously, but it was earlier in the series. He was, coach's decision didn't play the series before, but there were a lot of rumblings from beat reporters that maybe Cousins gets into the game this next series, and he was min priced on DraftKings for game one. Did get into the series, got into the box score, and if we get any guys like that tonight, that can go a long way in reducing your duplicates and even helping you jam some studs because we've seen this playoffs, Chuck, where a 1K player has scored 0 points and been in the
mm,
optimal lineup. So,
mm.
there's a couple different reasons why you might want to play a 1K guy, even if you don't even think that it's likely that they get on the court.
I want to say there might have been one game where a min price guy put up a zero and was the maybe something happened in the last minute where he wasn't, but he was the optimal captain up until like a minute left in the game with a zero in the captain, which means if you get the 1K guy that gets minutes, right? And like let's say everyone's putting Reggie Jackson, you put like a Najee Zeke Najee, and he scores 1 fantasy point, you have an advantage over everyone else that played a 1K guy. But we actually do have a couple viable 1K guys: Christian Braun, Haywood Highsmith, and Cody Zeller. Now, Haywood Highsmith is not the flatman. I think Cody Zeller's 1,200 on DraftKings, but those three guys are reasonable. Highsmith, I think we have to be careful who we're putting him in lineups with, like Kevin Love, Caleb Martin. But he might be out of the rotation as well. And then Christian Brown is probably going to see a few minutes. So Vegas has this as a 9.5 point game. If Denver's up by 9 or 10 points with say 3 minutes left, the starters are still going to be in the game.
Right.
They're going to be on the game. They're going to finish the game if it stays close and it finishes at 10 points. And so, a question I saw earlier was talking about are we interested in any blowout stuff? And like you can build a part of your set with those parameters, but I think if you're making all of your lineups anticipating a blowout, you're making a mistake. But if you're like hand building a few lineups, and I think that it's okay to kind of mix in a few of the cheap guys, I guess. Jokic is probably still going to be the optimal captain in a lot of situations. It's just raw points matter. If the Nuggets blow out the Heat, then Jimmy and Bam are probably both going to fail pretty hard while the Nuggets guys get there.
Right.
So it's just a question of finding the balance. If we're playing Jokic a captain or Jokic in the MVP spot, how are we getting a little bit different? And FanDuel, I think we can get a little bit different with the star and pro spots. We're going to mix it up, but DraftKings is a little difficult because I'm getting a lot of Jokic captain and then just sprinklings of everyone else.
I mean, that makes sense. And this isn't the regular season, right? Like, if a team is
Mhm.
up 10 with 3 minutes left, or like
Mhm.
maybe 12 with the 2 minutes left,
Yeah.
in the middle of the regular season, they will pull their guys, especially if they're on a back to back or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And again, you're the NBA expert, so please correct me if I'm wrong here. But even if they're up like 12 with a minute left, there's no guarantee that they pull the starters, right? So it would take a massive blowout
Mhm.
for that to benefit some of these 1K guys that we don't expect to play at all. We really need them to unexpectedly enter the rotation or
Mhm.
have an injury.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's my thought. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because even if it's 20 points, I would still expect the starters to be on the court until at least 2 minutes left in the game, if not even less. And then it's just you're hoping to get the 1K guy that takes a shot or grabs a rebound, right?
It's
And
eerily similar to when you bet college basketball and you bet the 1 seed versus the 16, and you
mhm,
got minus 24.5 in round one, and all the walk-ons come on the court, and you're
yeah,
rooting for the walk-ons to make a shot. That's the equivalent of what you'd be rooting for when it comes to 1 minute left in the game and a blowout here.
pretty much, yeah. And One difference from the last series. So with Miami and Boston, there was no shortage of mid-range guys that could get there and be the optimal captain, or even put up in the 40s, right? With Denver and the Lakers, I can't remember who was the optimal captain every time. I think AD was game one. Jokic might have been once, but then Jamal Murray, Austin Reeves, whoever, um, like min price guys were more likely to be optimal in that series, I think, versus this one, just because now we're adding a lot of these Heat guys like Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, all have a path to putting up, a chunk of fantasy points where I don't think the players on the Lakers necessarily did. Like we did kind of, but the just I don't know. It's kind of different too because we had three top price studs in the Lakers Nuggets series, and here we only have two, Jimmy and Jokic. And Jimmy, I'm really not getting that much Jimmy today. I kind of have to put a minimum exposure percentage to get him at all in my lineups. It's just Jokic is projected so much higher. It's tough for me to get away from Jokic today.
Yeah, you and I were talking about that before we went live, and you were saying that the difference is so massive that it's not even
Mm-hmm.
worth potentially manually boosting the numbers or manually boosting your exposures to get to Jimmy. I
Mm-hmm.
guess my question to you is, what do you think the ownership discrepancy will be between those two guys on DraftKings? And then at what point is it just pure game theory enough to say, okay, let me get more Jimmy in there over Jokic just for this massive $25 GPP?
I'm not sure because, like, looking at the ownerships that we have here, Jokic 28 captain, Jimmy 17 captain. If this is anywhere close to accurate, then I'm just playing all the Jokic captain, and I'm probably not going to get to Jimmy at all. It would have to be. I mean, I'd be surprised honestly if Jimmy's over 10% captain. Just it's if he's in your captain spot and you're looking at your lineups, why wouldn't you just change it to Jokic? His chance of success is so much better. And even then, like a lot of the Jimmy lineups are probably going to be pretty similar. So I don't know if I saw like if I knew Jokic was coming in 50% captain and Jimmy at 5, then I'd probably force in
Sure.
10 to maybe even 15% Jimmy, but I don't think it's going to be that large of a discrepancy. So I'm just going to go heavy Jokic. I'm interested in Jamal, and then he's not showing up here yet, but Cody Zeller is the min price guy that I'm going to take some shots on today. It makes sense if Bam gets into foul trouble. Are they really going to have just Kevin Love or Haywood Highsmith out there to guard Jokic? Not that Cody Zeller is much better, but he is a bigger body. So
Fair enough. And you just mentioned Highsmith and Reggae Joe in the chat. What's up, Reggae says you guys like Highsmith in the utility spot. I know you mentioned them briefly earlier too, and maybe some rules around him. Maybe just a little recap for people who are considering using Haywood Highsmith in their flex or utility spots.
So do I like Haywood Highsmith? No. He is a player who could just not play today. He could just be out of the rotation. He played like 34 minutes, I think, in game 5, didn't play at all in game 6, and then played 3 or 4 minutes in game 7. So, like I said, we need to see the starting lineup. If it's Caleb Martin starting, I'm just going to assume that Kevin Love's the guy off the bench, just based on the Jokic matchup. But I'm completely guessing here. If you get to Highsmith and he actually comes in 5% on DraftKings, I think that's a pretty good contrarian play. But DFS Jayhawk called it out in the chat too. Christian Brown is the most likely 1K guy because he's probably going to play 3 to 5 minutes at least in the regular rotation, and then he's going to play blowout time too.
Hmm.
So, I mean, if you have the 400 extra to get to Highsmith, you can mix him in, but he's not a player I'm going to prioritize or anything. Like I
That's
said,
fair.
I think Cody Zeller is the cheap guy that I'm interested in today that I'm hoping the field just doesn't get to, and I'm talking specifically for the $1 million contest. We're probably going to chop, but we'd like to chop with less than 100 players, not 300 people.
Yeah. For sure. So, good question there, Joe. If you guys have questions, throw them in the chat. We're here for another 15 minutes or so. So, any questions you have about tonight's game, and again, like Chuck said, we are focusing on the big contest because that's where most people have accumulated their satellite tickets. But if you have questions about smaller contests or other GPPs, let us know. Chuck, when looking at historical NBA Showdown GPPs, obviously they're very difficult to win solo. Two other instances, in addition to playing a super low owned 1K guy that stand out to me. I don't know how viable they are for this specific game, so I'm going to ask you. One is playing the low owned captain, right? The mid tier captain, whoever it is. That's one way. And then the other way is leaving salary on the table, and not just for the hell of it. Usually, what has to happen, at least from my experience and my research, is you have a maybe a lower to mid price guy who outscores a mid tier guy.
Mhm.
Or because if you have extra salary and you're not playing Jokic or Butler, that's probably a problem. But it can, I don't know, can Strus outscore Vincent or something like that, and that would save you 1K. Like that's a potential option. So those two ideas, how do they work for tonight's game?
So to me, that's the easiest way to get different. And it's not intentionally leaving salary on the table. It's just, yeah, if I have Struce projected for slightly better than Gabe Vincent, then the builder's going to put him in the lineups first. And if I have, let's say, the optimal lineup with Gabe Vincent in it, and I just take him out and put Max Struce, and now I have $1,000 left over. Um, it's something like you got to be careful with how many unique players you're putting per lineup. You can play with that in the builder, but I don't know. I think it's a good strategy. It just because most people are going to by default, if the industry wide projection has Gabe Vincent above Max Struess, he's just going to show up in that specific lineup so much
Right,
more. And you'll
right.
see it at the top. Like if they both have 0 points, you're tied with all of them, but only 3 people have the one with Max Struess, but 10 people have the one with Vincent. So it's a lesser chop, um, and I think it happens more often than would seem. Just by looking at it, if that makes sense. Like I think it's better to go with the lower owned guy and take that leverage because when we only chop 3 ways, it's a pretty big difference from chopping 70 ways. If
Yeah,
that's
I
the
don't
case.
think. Yeah, I don't think the lineup ownership matches the potential payout in those
Hmm.
scenarios. And
Hmm.
again, for role players or like secondary players like that, for sure. So, what about mid tier captains? These guys that are in the 5K to 8K range. Any of them stand out? Interested in playing them at captain?
Well, so one thing I guess I should have talked about a little sooner. I think the only way the Heat win this game is by taking a ton of threes and making them. They have to win the 3 point variance battle. And so, yeah, I think a lot of these guys, if Max Struess is a player capable of hitting 5 threes, Duncan Robinson is a player capable of hitting 5 threes. Gabe Vincent, sure. Caleb Martin, we've seen him do it how many games in a row? And so mixing in these guys and just hoping that one of them just goes off at 3. I mean, we can see the captain ownerships right here. All of these guys are below 5%.
Yep.
Like I love just getting to a ton of Jokic a captain. Maybe half, 60% of my lineups are going to have Jokic a captain. I'm really heavy on him today. A little bit of Jamal, but then not that much Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter, and just all these guys at 5% and under, especially for that $1 million contest on DraftKings. I think it's really powerful.
I agree. I agree. And Gary Gary in the chat, what's up? Gary says, can anyone on Miami stop him? And I think the answer is no for basically any team in the league, right?
Yeah.
But I think the real question is, how does he fail tonight? He's not
Mhm.
the optimal captain, or he's not even the optimal lineup. What has to happen outside of injury or foul trouble for Jokic to not be optimal?
If Nuggets are up by 30 at halftime. But here's the thing: if they're up by 30, then it's Jamal or Jokic that did the damage. So I
Right.
guess Jamal going off is the way that Jokic fails. I mean, we don't really see Jokic get into foul trouble because people doesn't play defense, whatever. But yeah, I guess he could get into foul trouble, and they just don't. They have a lead; they don't feel the need to play him. It would be something like Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter are doing well. Aaron Gordon's someone I'm personally really, really low on. I just with Jokic and Jamal and MPJ in the lineup, MPJ to me is such a better play, even with the price difference. But yeah, it's basically just everyone else doing it and Jokic not doing it. So
That's fair. I mean, I saw a tweet from a respected NBA bettor right before we went live saying that the line for Jokic to lead the series in assists is something in the range of minus 20,000, where basically you have to bet $1
mhm.
million to win 5,000.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I don't follow the NBA as much, but I mean, Christ, is no one else pass the basketball in these two teams? How does that work?
I would be interested if I got the right odds in betting that Jokic had 2 times as many assists as whoever finishes second. There's just no one. I mean, because if Jokic is the guy on the Nuggets, right? I mean, Jamal Murray's second. Maybe he'll average 5, 6. But who on the Heat is even going to average 6 assists, 5 assists? Like Bam, maybe. Like Gabe Vincent's not a passer like that.
Kyle
I don't.
Lowry.
Yeah, Kyle Lowry off the bench, I guess. I don't know. I mean, Kyle Lowry's a guy I'm interested in just because he is the vet, he has the experience, and we've seen him just randomly come in and get extra minutes when he didn't play the game before. And if he's playing well, Eric Spoelstra will leave him on the court,
It's a
and
big
so
if.
that's a spot too. Yeah, right.
Uh, you mentioned FanDuel earlier.
Hmm.
Again, if you guys have questions about DraftKings, throw it in the chat. But Chuck, you mentioned FanDuel earlier, and obviously Jokic is the massive favorite to be the optimal MVP over there. But really, what we see I mean, we've seen it in the last 2 weeks or so. We've seen the
Mhm.
big showdown contests over there chopped like 3 or 4 ways, which is pretty
Mhm.
respectable. 40,000 per person or per lineup. And the big reason why is someone puts a sub 10% play in their star spot, right? And the 27% star ends up as the optimal pro,
Mhm.
right? Or whatever
Mhm.
the 1.5 or 1.2 multiplier is. So if you play Jokic there, that's an easy way to get different without even sacrificing much upside.
Mhm. Yeah, well, on FanDuel, I don't know if people. I haven't been playing there, so I haven't seen the ownership percentages. But I know Caleb Martin was a big reason why there was probably a lesser chop over there.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
it's hard to believe in Caleb Martin dropping 48 fantasy. Like, is Caleb Martin a 48 fantasy point per game guy? No, but he's getting the opportunity, and his confidence has got to be one of the he's got to be one of the most confident athletes of all time right now, right? And so
For sure. Yeah.
the weird thing about FanDuel, especially with this pricing, I wish I could show it on here, but let me just try and add it here. So if you put Jokic at MVP and say Jimmy at the star spot, you can see it over on the right. There's only 8,800 average salary,
Right.
and it just you can't build a reasonable lineup with those parameters. And so even if Jimmy ends up being the second highest scorer, there's a lot of ways that he's not even in the optimal lineup at all. Just if the pro, if just the next guy's up score reasonably close to him, and just the salaries work better, unless two min price guys get there. But I don't think you can fit Jokic and Butler in a lineup together on FanDuel. And I already mentioned that I'm not really playing Butler on DraftKings either. So
There you go. So if you want to fade Chuck, get in your Butler lineups. And let's see. So we got some more questions here about Love, Brown, Zeller, all these guys. Green. Race fan says if Bam sits early with foul trouble, who's coming in? Love, Zeller, small ball with Highsmith. What do you think?
I mean, that is, I think, probably the spot where we're going to find the biggest edge if you are correct in what you think is going to happen there. I'm personally going to take a little bit more of a stand on Cody Zeller. I'm getting to Kevin Love a little bit too, but Zeller's price just allows me to fit in that extra MPJ or Aaron Gordon in my lineup. And
What do you think the field is projecting to happen in that scenario?
Love Brown. I'm not sure. I think the field is kind of lazy, and I know that Jeff Green is someone that was showing up in industry-wide projections earlier. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but Jeff Green seems like he might be a little bit overowned from that group.
Okay.
And then, yeah, like I said, if you can get Kevin Love, Cody Zeller, or Highsmith correct, then you're doing pretty well. I don't think I want more than one of those guys in my lineup, though. I don't think I'd want to play any of those
Yeah,
two.
that makes sense, right?
Hmm.
Right, that makes sense. The guys that are going to cannibalize each other's playing time. Any other situations like that on this slate for both teams that if this guy succeeds, this other guy probably doesn't.
So Max Struess and Duncan Robinson, they do not share the court, and they don't even equal up to 48 minutes actually. In I think Game 6, in Game 7 they did. They traded. They filled out the full 48 minutes, but the game before that there was like 4 minutes where neither of them were on the court. But Struess and Duncan Robinson are two guys I probably wouldn't have in the same lineup together. Like KCP and
Just
Bruce Brown.
sorry. Just to clarify, that's just because if one is cooking, the other's not playing. Is that why?
Yeah, and it's like Duncan Robinson's price is low enough to where he's getting there. He's got there in 20 minutes. If Max Struess plays 28, there's things that Max Struess can do to get there too. But like I don't know if I set a rule for it, but just looking through, those are two guys that I would try to avoid having in the same lineup.
Okay.
Maybe FanDuel's a little different because of the pricing, but then I was going to say KCP and Bruce Brown. It feels kind of natural to not want to have them both in the same lineup, but they've been both optimal more than a couple times in these playoffs. And another set of players, Gabe Vincent and Kyle Lowry, they've been optimal together a couple times in these playoffs too, but they're sharing the court for, I don't remember the exact number. I think it was like an average of 7 minutes a game in the Heat series.
Okay.
Or in the Heat Boston series. And so those are two guys that I don't think I want to have in the same lineup, Gabe Vincent and Kyle Lowry. And I think I actually prefer Kyle Lowry today, cheaper price. And like I said, veteran in the finals, he's been here before. And so it makes sense if Spoelstra gives him a little bit longer of a leash. And as long as he doesn't play terrible, then he should be on the court.
Once again, another big if I'm judging by some of our Discord's reactions to watching the games live over the course of the playoffs. So,
Oh yeah, you should definitely be uncomfortable. Like especially if you're playing the Millie on DraftKings, you should be uncomfortable with whatever lineups you're entering today. You should say these are disgusting, and maybe one of them wins.
what do you think about this? Just another idea, right? We've seen Murray get hot in the fourth quarter,
Mhm.
hot from deep in some of these playoff games. What if you have Murray and Jokic in the same lineup? Murray at captain, but you leave enough salary to where you actually could upgrade to Jokic at captain, right? No
Mhm.
one's going to do that, but
Yeah,
Murray is optimal, right? Does that make sense, or is that too crazy?
in a
Because I feel
contest
like,
like the Millie, I
yeah,
think it's fine.
okay,
Yeah, I mean, it's like Jamal Murray only has to outscore Jokic by 0.1 in that scenario, right? And the difference in the chop is probably because, like you said, no one's going to have that lineup. The difference is 20 fantasy points between them, basically. 5 on the OF scale. So I think it's a good thing. And if you use the builder, you will get lineups. You will get that. You will get Jamal at captain with Jokic and utility. I'm not sure there any are going to leave that salary, but like if you use a builder for showdown, you're gonna get those random lineups that we want. You just got to go through and make sure that they're viable. But the builder does a really good job of giving that randomization for showdown.
yeah. So remember, occupyfantasy.com/lineup builder for those who aren't aware. The link is in the description below. I didn't even, I mean, I did realize, but I didn't fully realize as I was forming that sentence that the price difference at captain for those two guys is nearly $5,000. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think we've ever seen outside of like a COVID game where the winning salary is left $5,000 or more. So it actually
Yeah.
probably doesn't even make much sense to do. I don't even know how that would work if it did end up being the winning lineup.
Right. I don't think I like, and I knew that, but then you asked a question, so I wasn't thinking about that either.
I'm just
Um,
spitballing here.
but yeah, Jokic and Jamal, I think, are the two best captain options, like most likely captain options anyway. Not necessarily to win, but well, I guess
Sure.
it would be to win, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Someone said about KCP and Brown. They didn't hear what you said. You weren't necessarily saying don't avoid them. You were saying that intuition might say to avoid them together, but
Yeah.
they have been optimal a couple times together, right?
Yeah, I think it's okay to play KCP and Bruce Brown. It's not something I'm trying to force, but it's not something that I'm not allowing in my set, I guess.
Okay. Anyone else besides Butler? I know you said Butler. You're not playing any or a ton of. Anyone
Mhm.
else that you think, or just with the way you're building the field is too high on today?
Aaron Gordon, I think. He's just a guy who constantly underperforms his projection to the point where I'm not sure why his like fantasy point per minute projection hasn't come down with how much he's been underperforming in the playoffs. I don't think maybe he's exceeded his projection once. Uh, it's just a guy that and I mentioned comparing him to Michael Porter Jr. earlier. Just Michael Porter Jr. has such a cleaner path to getting that 40 plus fantasy points or whatever it might be that we're hoping for. Just if he gets hot from three, he's going to keep pulling, and his rebounds and assists have been pretty consistent. I'm expecting, the model has him 37 minutes. As long as he's not playing like an idiot, he's going to play 37 minutes. And so I think I'd just rather get some MPJ paid a little bit extra for the slightly lower ownership, higher chance at a ceiling game.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. It is 6:28. We'll be here for a couple more minutes. Question from Jose: which player other than Jokic and Butler is drawing the most ownership?
I mean, well, right now Jokic is drawing about 113% ownership. Let's refresh the model. So you should probably play him. He's going to be chalk. But it looks like Jamal and Bam. And Bam is pretty interesting today because his projection has come up since I looked at it early this morning. I am kind of low on Bam too. I just kind of think that his whole focus tonight should be to guard Jokic, and hopefully Caleb Martin, if he's starting, he keeps up that offensive output. Bam doesn't have to do much, and my fade works out.
All right. Sounds good. We like that plan. And maybe we'll see a screenshot from I Am the Boss. Okay, tonight. For those of you still watching, make sure you are subscribed to our channel here on YouTube. It's free to do so. Get you notified whenever we go live or upload any videos. And if you like this show, one, give us a thumbs up, but two, let us know either in the chat or in the comments or in a tweet that hey, we like these NBA finals, these NBA showdown shows. We're unsure of the demand sometimes, but Chuck, I've seen that literally every single contest ever has filled for NBA Showdown throughout the playoffs. So I know the appetite is there. So I
Yeah.
imagine people are still playing and want the content.
Yeah. I mean, Showdown on DraftKings is great. Well, maybe it's not great. Showdown on FanDuel is cool. It's just I don't know. The format's kind of weird. Like we shouldn't have 150 player chops every night.
I mean, I agree. I don't know how you fix that. And I do think
I don't
that
know.
there's a huge edge for people who run simulations. Like there's a big reason why a lot of the top simulation players are really good at NBA Showdown because it's a really solvable game. I mean, I don't
Hmm.
know. This isn't the time to hypothesize on how to fix the game, but any thoughts on how NBA Showdown could be better from a DFS perspective?
I saw them talking about this on Twitter. Some of the top pros, maybe just straight up order in five order of fantasy points. It would, you know, it
Mm,
would cut down the dupes by a lot. But I don't know if that's as fun as the like, because it's really easy to jump into a DraftKings contest now. Like my mom jumped into DraftKings contests, right, and she has no
right.
problem putting a lineup. She actually came in first before I did last season on one bullet. So it's like the format now is pretty easy for anyone to access, which is probably more important for
Yeah,
the
true,
long term health of DFS.
true.
But who knows? Maybe they'll switch something up. Reggae Joe, any love for Lowry? Yeah. So Lowry is someone who is probably not going to show up well in projections. We have him for 24 minutes, and he's still kind of low. I mean, he's 24 minutes is less than everyone else here, but he's a guy that I'm willing to go outside the projections on just because of the finals experience. He's a vet. And so, yeah, I like getting to Lowry more than the field.
Cool. Uh, that's it for me, Chuck. So I think just to recap, just really quickly, three ways if you're playing the millionaire contest to get different or unique is one, you play a super low owned 1K player that isn't necessarily expected to play, but maybe they get into the rotation or an injury happens. Two is playing a mid tier captain. Three is leaving a little salary where a mid tier or lower price player outscores one in the price tier above them. So that's the three major ways, Chuck. That's all I can contribute to this conversation. I'll let you close out the show with any final thoughts.
Hopefully we're in for a good series. I don't want to see a 4-0 sweep from the Nuggets. I would be really surprised if the Heat won, but so I talked about I'm not playing Jimmy that much today. Like Jimmy Butler in the playoffs, like you sometimes you have to go outside the projections. Like I'm probably going to force a little bit of Jimmy in because he is a player capable of exceeding what like he can outscore Jokic. It's possible, but I don't think the field is going to respect Jokic's ceiling as much. So in the end, I guess it's a lot of words to say. Play a lot of Jokic, but probably still try and get some Jimmy in there.
Fair enough. All right, guys, that'll do it for the show. Appreciate you listening. Again, let us know if you want to see more of this type of content, more NBA Showdown content. Let us know in the comments or in the tweets or in Discord. And again, make sure you follow Chuck on Twitter at Chuck Silver DFS. Follow me at Brian Jester FF. I won't be tweeting about NBA. Chuck certainly will, though. And be sure to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. It's free, and that'll get you notified when we go live. And OccupyFantasy.com is where you can utilize all the tools you saw on screen today. Chuck, good luck tonight, man. Hope you take it down.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. And just real quick, just because two people asked about Duncan right at the end. Yeah, Duncan Robinson's fine at captain or in flex. Not necessarily get into him over anyone else, but I think he's going to be in the rotation. We should be getting to some Duncan tonight. So join the Discord. We have a lot of